Random character generation is not an easy task to tackle in Blender. However, it's not necessarily hard. Bottom line is I want an easy way to randomly generate characters and randomly generate things in general within Blender. My favorite way to do it is using the random property in the object info node in the material editor. I have this cube here. I'm in cycles, and I have my denoiser turned on, and I'm just going to add a material to it. So this base color here can be anything at once, obviously. If I added an object info node, we have this random property of the object info. So a little bit of background about this random. This object info node works off of the index of this, which is basically the unique identifier of this object within the entire scene. Each object is going to carry its own index, so it will give you a different random value. So if I plug this random directly into the base color, it's going to generate me a random color from 0 to 1, which is basically from black to white, a random shade of gray. If I were to duplicate this again, it's a different color. I can continue to duplicate this because it's going to generate a new object. I've generated 5 objects that each have 5 unique identifiers. Again, since we have 5 objects, we've generated 5 unique identifiers, and that's basically 5 unique ones of these nodes. So even though it's the same material, we're getting a different output. And this is really powerful. But there is an issue with it. You can't just continue to use this random, like, oh sweet, okay, we have random stuff now, let's randomize everything. Well, this here is the same number, no matter where this random goes within the object. So what I mean by that is, this is a dark gray, and this is a bright white. Say I want to also randomize the roughness. Well, if I plug this random back into the roughness, we have an issue, because everywhere that is white is also going to be not reflective or very rough, and everywhere that it's dark, the roughness value of the darkness is going to be pretty low. So we want to switch that up. So every time we need a new random, we have to add in a white noise. If you plug the random directly into the white noise down here, and then this value can go into the roughness, we now have a brand new random, because this is basically just changing the seed. So if I were to plug the value directly into the output here to see, you can see these values, these gray values, are much different than these gray values. And you can take this a step further and change this white noise from 3D to 4D, and now you have this slider, which basically is like an additional random seed. So if I just change this number to 1, let me plug it in first here. Every time I just change this number at all, I get a different random seed. So say I want to have another random, then say I want to randomize the metallic value. Well, I would plug the random into a white noise, and I would just give this a new seed and plug this into the metallic. So we have this random for the metallic, we have this random for the roughness, and we have this random for the base color. And this is basically the idea. So what I like to do is I like to just make it simple for myself, and I like to create a new node, and I call it true random, or a random node, because there isn't really a random node. And it's a really simple node to make. We just take a white noise, and you can make sure it's set for 4D, and the W is at 0, doesn't fully matter. And then you'll take an object info node, and you just have to plug the random directly into the vector. And that's the extent of the node. We can just highlight those and create a group. And we want to output the random value. And on the input, you want to put the W. And we can, over here in the inputs, we can just change W to seed. So you know this is the seed if you want a different random output. And again, this is going to be random based on the object's ID. And then there's the value out. So if I tab out of that, I can now change this properties over here, the name of this. I can change the name of this to random. So now I have a random node. And if you want to get fancy, you can give it a color. You don't have to, but a random node. So now I can delete all this ugliness here, and I can plug this over here, and now I have a random node. And if I want a random color, I can plug it in there. And if I want a random metallic value, I can plug it in there. But I don't want it to be the same random as this, so I have to change the seed to something different. So now the seed of 1 is going to give us a different random pattern than the base color. And then I want a different random for the roughness. I can change it again to 2. So now we actually have, we're just getting random generations here. One way to probably see this a little better is if I add a hue saturation here, and then we can make the hue and just give it a color here. So now every time I duplicate one of these, I will get a new, with the same material, a brand new shader that's either metallic, reflective, or has a different color, and they're not the same random pattern, if that makes sense. It actually builds its own random pattern. So that's the base level of what we're working with here today. And here I've built just a character head to show you. Now, the first thing we can do, if I duplicate this character over, nothing changes because there's no random setup. So I can keep duplicating this over and nothing changes. So let's switch over here. I have this slot open. If I can click on the slot, I'll go to the skin shader. I am just using the skin BSDF that I created in my other tutorial. If you want to click up here to watch, it'll teach you how to make the skin shader. And we have a skin tone slider, so I can go from really white to darker skin. I want that every object here, so if I see this object is cube, if I click again, I have cube 10, cube 11. Each of these have their own ID. So what does that mean? Well, it means, since we made our true random node, if I go into our group here and I add in random here, I can plug it in to the skin tone. And each of these characters is going to randomly be assigned a skin tone based off of their unique identifier. And we can use this as the first seed. So skin tone will be the first seed. Now you have to make sure you're not overlapping these seeds, otherwise it's going to use the same pattern and you don't want to do that. But I want to take a look at hairstyles. So I keep running into this issue where now we're dealing with shapes. Anything that you can change color, reflective, or subsurf scattering, any of those are materials that can be changed, but how do you actually change the shape of something without using a driver or anything? So I figured out that if we use displacement, we can change it. Okay, so I have this one hairstyle that I made here, and this I took from, this is a very stylistic hairstyle. This is a very stylized hairstyle, but if I go to the side view here, and like I did in my character creation tutorial, I just like to grab this part of the scalp up here, and go back, and then you can also grab these sideburns if you like. I can just duplicate it, and then P to separate it by the selection, and then I have this little bit of hair that you can actually start styling. So Alt-E to extrude along the faces, and then maybe I'll make a bit of a high top. Okay, so I have these five haircuts here, and I am just going to go through, and they all have no material on them, which is perfect. So I'm just going to go through and give them all a material. I will call this one balding. So each hairstyle has its own material now. And now that they're like that, I can just grab all of them, and I can, we have to be sure we're sort of backing ourselves up, so make sure you're saving as you're going. But also, it's helpful sometimes to just click to move all of your hairstyles into a collection, and then right-click it and duplicate your collection. And then you can just call it Hairstyles EU for backup. And you can just turn it off, just so you know you have them sitting somewhere in case you totally mess this up and want to go back. So I'll grab all my hairstyles and I'll just right click on them and I will select the objects. So I have everything inside that collection and I don't have to worry that I didn't accidentally grab one because I know everything I want is in the collection, and from the outliner, I right clicked and I selected all the objects. Now I can Control J and join them all together. So I have now one object with a bunch of different meshes inside. So I'll grab this object and I will move it back to the center, 0.25 for the direction. All right, so here's all my hairstyles, and it's as simple as I can just join these two together. So we are all in one object. Kind of looks like he's wearing a hat right now. Let's look in the rendered view. Okay, perfect. So here's what's going to get a little more advanced. We need to basically randomize which hairstyle shows. And the way to do that is, first of all, go into each hairstyle. So since you merge them together, all the hairstyles should come together and you'll have them in here. So you go through each hairstyle. So you'll want to go in under options and change from displacement only to bump. You want to change it from bump only to displacement and bump. This is going to allow you to physically displace the mesh within the render. And you want to do this for each of your hairstyles here. Okay, so now this is going to allow you to take advantage of this displacement here. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to create this thing, but if it's too difficult to create and you can't figure this out, don't worry, you can skip ahead to the video and I'll provide a link to download it in the description of this video. So, in the groups here, we are going to use this random hairstyle. Now, this is the ultimate node for doing this, and the random hairstyle displacement will plug into here. But this random hairstyle is made up of multiple nodes as well that I created. The random hairstyle is made up of an HMasterRandom node that I created, an HMesh node, and an Activator node. Now, they're not that difficult, but we're going to walk through each one of them. Okay, so I'm in a brand new scene here. I'm going to load in a cube here, and we'll make a new material. Like the first thing we did with the other materials, we have to set this displacement to displacement and bump. And I will hide this principal BSDF because it's just sort of in the way right now. And I'll put it up because we're not going to look at the shading or anything. We just want to focus on the displacement. So let's think about displacement for a second. What does it do? So in texture coordinates, if I open up a texture coordinate, if I were to throw the object coordinates into the displacement, it's going to double in size. Now, why is that? Well, it's because we are displacing, right? If there's nothing on there, it's not being displaced at all. So it's already as it is. But if I displace it by the coordinates, it takes what it already is, which is 0 to 1, and then say, okay, let's displace it from 0 to 1. It displaces it by exactly what it is. So if we want to do any displacement, we have to sort of subtract out this initial displacement. And again, really what that means is we already have coordinates happening to make this shape. If you add this object coordinates into the displacement, it's going to double that. It's going to double the vector. So we don't want that. So basically we want to add in a vector math, and we want to just subtract those coordinates again. So basically we're taking the object coordinates and then we're subtracting the object coordinates and displacing by that, which means we're displacing by nothing. So if I take this away, nothing changes, right? Because essentially I'm just doing 1 minus 1 and I'm saying, hey, displace this by 0. So the reason we do this is because now you want to do this at the very end, right? You want to say, okay, everything I just did, all that displacement, I want to do only that displacement and not the original object coordinates. So if I make a little line here, so any displacement that I do to the top of this subtraction is going to be the only displacement for the whole object. So we can do a lot of crazy things here. We can do, scaling and morphing and rotating and all this fun stuff that people like to do in November. But for the sake of this, we really want to just do something really simple. I want to take another vector math, and at the top of this here, I can add this, so I can say, hey, let's add to the left or right, X, or let's add on the Y, but really, I want to change this add to multiply. And look, if I multiply it by 0, there's nothing there. And if I multiply it by 1, there's something there. And that's the power of this displacement and this whole technique, is because we're going to say, hey, I want to randomize when this is 1 and when it's 0. And if I coordinate all those together on however many haircuts I have total, it will actually randomize through all those using that beautiful object random that we still created here, because we're still in the materials property. That's the most important takeaway here, is the fact that we're controlling the actual mesh inside the material shader editor. So if you look at what we just created here, if I open up my Activator here, you can see that all that's inside the Activator is exactly what we just created, except for the fact that this active will be open. So we just created this pretty much, where we have the object coordinates that are subtracted from the object coordinates, right? These two go in here, but on the top branch here, we add this multiply, this vector multiply, and we want to multiply it with either 1 or 0, whether it's active or not. So if it's not active, we're going to be sending a 0 to this multiply, and basically we're going to multiply the original coordinates by 0, so we get 0, and then we take 0 minus the original coordinates, so we get negative coordinates. And then if you displace the negative coordinates at the very end, nothing's going to show up. Uncheck this in the displacement, and I just plug this guy in here. We need to send it object coordinates. But if it's not active, nothing's there. So if I do make it active, it's going to appear there. And let me show you how this works. So as this goes down, this is basically a scale from 0 to 1, right? 0, it's 0 times the coordinates, and 1, it's going to be 1 times the coordinate, all inside of our activator. Now, I don't want any of this scaling happening, so that is why whatever this value is here that's being sent, so there's going to be a value being sent to this active, and that's going to be either 0 or 1. I take a math node here, and I put it between there, and I just do greater than 0.5. So that way it just snaps. There's no scaling. It's just either 0 or it's 1, and that's all it is. So if I were to, now let me bring out an HMesh. So now that you know what the activator does, the activator is basically saying, oh, okay, it's either active or it's not. That's pretty simple. Inside the HMesh, which is basically just the hair mesh, right? If I open this up, we have exactly that. And this is just a glorified version of what we just created. Again, we have the activator that's being sent this active node right into here. And we're just sending it through a greater than, so that way we don't get the weird scaling. We just get an on or off, pretty much a binary switch. And we're sending it object coordinates. So this is where it's containing the coordinates. So our HMesh pretty much can take the place of all this. So I can just get rid of all this here now. And I just have an HMesh, right? We don't even need the activator. We have the hair mesh. Now the hair mesh says, are you active? No. Or is it active? Yes. And it's either 0 or 1. We want to send this a value. Are you 0 or are you 1? And to do that, we have this node, the HMasterRandom. So let me draw this out now. We have this hair mesh, right? And we want to say, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different haircuts, and I want to randomly pick one of these haircuts to turn on this character, which means we want to randomly send 1 to one of the haircuts and 0 to the rest, right? Because we have this HMesh. So we have 5. So say haircut number 2 will be turned on. We want to send a signal of 0 to the first one, 1 to the second, 0, 0, 0. This is what you would consider a case or a switch. You want to send 1 to one of these numbers. And the way we're going to do that is we will set up a math node. We'd have one math node, a final math node. And you want to think of this like a color ramp. So take a look at this color ramp here. If I were to add in our random node that we created, and we'll just give it a random node of 3 for the sake of this. If I plug this random node in here, we're going to say 1/5 of the time, 1 out of every 5 times here, it's going to send a 1. So plug this color right into the HMesh here. So as I start duplicating this over, we're going to randomly get 1 out of every 5 times this mesh is going to show up. See, it's quite unlikely, but as you change this number, the randomability of these appearing shows up. So we want a way to control this a little better, and unfortunately the color ramp does not have a node input for this position, and I know you can set it up with a driver, but I really just don't want to do that. So we're going to make a manual color ramp. So how do you make a manual color ramp? Well, basically, let's break down what is a color ramp. 0.2. So right now I'm sending it a value, and if this value is greater than 0.2, it's going to be black, or if it's less than 0.2, it's going to be white. So we can do that. So let's get a math node here, and we'll say, hey, let's get a greater than. Well, let's start with a less than. If it is less than a certain threshold, whatever that value is, right? So we'll get a value node, and we'll say 0.2. Perfect. If there's a value that's less than 0.2, it's going to return 1. If it's greater than 0.2, it's going to return 0. So right now, this color ramp is exactly what this is doing. Now, the problem with this is you have to actually think about this color ramp being able to move. So whenever I do the next hairstyle down the line, we really want this to look like 0.4, 0.2, oops, 0.4, and this one being 0.2. But the problem is now we have all this white space that now should be black. You really want it to look like this now. See how we've actually shifted this down the row one, because each haircut is essentially going to sit into one of these slots, one of these 5 slots, however many you divide it by. So we have to factor that into this, because otherwise just this less than, right now we really have this, and we don't want that. We want to have another space. So we have to think, okay, so it's going to be less than 0.2, but greater than 0, right? Or whatever this value is minus itself. So this value, 0.2, subtracted by itself. Which in this case is 0. So I've combined these all together. Sweet. Now I know this is confusing, but stay with me here. Basically, we want to make an AND gate. We want to say when this is less than the when this is less than this threshold, but it's also greater than this threshold. So just in this little window here, when it's less than and when it's greater than. Which, if this returns a 1 and this returns a 1, we want to do AND, which is a multiply. So I want to multiply these together. This is going to give us basically an AND gate. So this multiplied by this is AND. And this is our final output here. This is going to say, yes, you are active. In that case, you are active. I'll duplicate this again. This is going to be our threshold here. So we'll say 0.1. Yeah. So I'll delete all these guys over here, and we'll just stick with our original one. All right. Now, this is a very nitpicky thing, but technically, this side of the AND gate is less than, but this side has to be greater than or equal to, which is not here. So, unfortunately, we have to also make or equal to. So, if I were to duplicate this, and I will make this one compare is equal to. So we have to compare this value to this one, which is the same as this greater than. We're saying, hey, are these two equal? With a wiggle room of nothing, it has to be exactly equal. If this is greater than or equal to, or, think about that, it has to be or. So, another math operator. Or, we would add them together. That way we always get something. If this is 0 and this is 0, neither of them, it's going to return 0. If one of them is, it would be 0 plus 1, or 1 plus 0, that's going to return a 1. If they're both, it'll send a 2, but we can clamp this to be only 0 or 1. It won't go above 1. So this is now effectively an OR gate, which I can rename OR. I can name this AND. So, greater than or equal to. And I can send this value into the AND now. So, basically, now we know that is this value on the bottom end of this exactly or higher than less than this? Ooh, baby, this is really getting into the math, isn't it? All right, so I'll shut this down here. So, why are we doing this? Well, because we want to be able to shift this around for each one. So this 0.2 here, why is this 0.2? Well, this is because we have 5 haircuts, and the likeliness of randomly selecting one of them is 1 out of 5, or 0.2. Which, if you want to be more jazzy about this, we can delete this, and we can add another math node. We can plug this right in, and we can do a divide. And the likeliness is 1 divided by 5, or we name this value the number of hairstyles. I'll just call this hairstyles. So this is the number of hairstyles, and I can plug this right in here. And I can say, hey, we had 5 hairstyles. This number is going to equally divide this color ramp into 5 portions, or 0.25. Say you decided to make 6 hairstyles. Well, I can then do that. And now it's going to equally divide this all the way down through. But for the sake of ours, we have 5 hairstyles. Why did I do this weird thing here where I said, or it's greater than 0? I mean, look at it. This is 0, right? It's this number subtracted by this. It's 1 minus 1, right? It's 0.2 minus 0.2. That's 0. Why didn't I just plug 0 into there? Well, it's because we needed the top part. We needed another portion up here. So the top part, I would like to multiply this top part by 1, right? And this value here that we're multiplying by on the greater than is going to be, which hairstyle is it? So if it's the first hairstyle, well then it's going to be here, right? Because it's 0. But if it's the second hairstyle, we actually take that 0.2 and we times it by 2, and now it's 0.4 right here. So let's take a deeper look here. Okay, so if it's hairstyle number 1, and we multiply it by, Well, this thing sits here, which really is just a bunch of math to get it back down to 0. It's like doing the distance formula from 0, 0 to 0, 0. It's a lot of math just to get you to obviously 0. But it's important if we know in the future we're going to be adding more factors into this, which we are, okay? Right? We have 5 hairstyles, so we have to be able to slide this thing around all the way. So on a base level, right, we're sending 1 divided by 5, which is 0.2, over into this. And we're saying, hey, times 0.2 by 1. Okay, sweet. We have 0.2 still. I get it. We still have 0.2. Nothing changed. And now we have 0.2 over here. And we're saying subtract 0.2 by 0.2. All right, we have 0. This is putting out 0 right now. So we did all this math just to get back to 0. Excellent. Why are you telling me this, Logan? Well, here's why. This value is our random. This is the random thing we're sending to it. Okay? So it's going to check this and say, hey, does this random fall between 0 and, well, 0.2, right? It's coming from here. Well, let's run this over. We have 1 divided by 5, which is 0.2, going into the less than. Okay, so is it less than 0.1? Or is 0.1 less than 0.2? Yes. And 0.1 is greater than or equal to, it's greater than, so that means it is true. So that means, yes, we're going to return a 1, and we're going to say, yeah, it's active. So this is pretty much set up to go, right? We have the random value we're sending to it. But there's still more we have to do here. This number at the top, this 0.2, multiplied is actually what's going to be less than. The reason we do that is because we're going to say, oh, if we're checking hairstyle 2, we have to now see that 0.1 is actually slid over, right? Now it's 0.4. Let's check this guy. It's 0.2. Well, now it's in this range, and 0.1 doesn't sit in there. It's going to be from 0.2 all the way to 0.4, right? So we're going to change that for haircut 2. So if it's haircut 3, suddenly 0.4 to 0.6 fits. But the math always works. The math always will work. So we're in the right spot now, and uh-oh, look what we just made. We literally just made this HMasterRandom. That's all this is. It's the exact same thing we just made, with some exceptions here. So I'll go over that here in a minute. I'm going to take it away from this active, from this HMesh. Now, this HMasterRandom wants to know these values. It wants to know, hey, how many hairstyles do you have total? We have 5. I'll plug that in right here. It's going to send that. What hairstyle are you looking at right now to do the random on? Well, that will be 1. Okay, and what's the random seed you're going to send it? Hey, this is Logan from the future, just chiming in real quick. I just wanted to clarify what's going on here. So this random seed function here is actually going to replace this value up here that you put. This is the randomizer, so I never really went over this, but basically you're going to want to replace this value here with that random node we made earlier, and that's where it's going to fit in. So once you group this all together, you'll want to plug the W from the random node. So the random will be here going over this. The W on the other side of the random is going to be coming out of this random seed. So you're going to have hairstyles total, and then the hairstyle number you're on will come out of this one. But I never really explained that. I just wanted to throw that in so you understood actually what was happening here. If I would update this random master right now, I would go in here, and we don't need this white noise or this, because look at this. Do you know what this is? We don't need a white noise or an object info because we already made this group earlier. We made a random group, right? I can delete this guy, and I can delete this guy, and I can just plug in my random to the random seed. Bam, look at that. So now we can change the random seed from outside of this. So now you see that we've just made this exactly. So we have this whole thing, right? And I can move this all out of the way, because realistically now, all that is this HMasterRandom. that value is just this final AND value saying, is that mesh turned on? And that is going to go right into this HMesh here, right? We're going to say, yep, you know what? We've got 5 total meshes, and we're going to look at mesh 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. One of these 5 will always produce a 1, and the other 4 will always not produce that number. Let me add in, so let's take a look at this, an HMasterRandom and an HMesh. Well, geez, look at that. We have this final random hairstyle, and that's exactly what this is. This is, if I go into it, it's just these two. It's literally just these two. We have to open this up. So because random hairstyle, when we have to only change the style number, the rest has to stay the same across. So the total styles has to stay the same across all the materials, and the random seed has to stay the same because it wants to use the same random pattern, and it wants to use the same number. So this random pattern has to stay the same. That's why we keep it inside this random hairstyle, and we're only changing which style we're looking at. And this is all we have to focus on, right? So we made a random hairstyle node, right? Congrats to you, because that was a tough one. And inside that, you made an HMasterRandom, and you made an HMesh, and you made an Activator, which the Activator is just inside the HMesh. So you have the Activator inside the HMesh, and then you have these two inside this one. This here is the hierarchy we're looking at for the random hairstyle node. Okay, all that math. All right, so how does it apply, right? Well, let's switch back over here. So we're back in our main scene, all right? And we now have 5 different hairstyles, right? So let's look at this. First of all, for the balding, I'll leave that alone for right now. So we don't need these because they're all inside the random hairstyle. So if you did that, the hard part, if you did it correctly, and again, if you couldn't follow along, you can just download this directly from the link I provided in the video. It's as easy as this. We need to just drop in the random hairstyle. So you would append it from whatever the blend file is that you have saved, and you would grab this, and just like an object going into edit mode, you tab into it, and then we're going to look at these master variables here for the whole scene. And we're going to say, how many hairstyles do we have? Well, in this case, we have 5. And what random seed do you want? Let's just call this, because the skin tone already used seed 1, we'll call this seed 2. Remember, it's important to change that random seed so we're not using the same pattern as the skin tone. So I will go back out of this, and now this is ready to be used. I can plug this directly into the material output. One important thing to remember is make sure your scale is equaled out, otherwise you'll get weird things going on. So the scale has to be at 1 for this to work. So again, you'll just plug this guy directly in there, and we're gonna say, hey, for balding, this is hairstyle number 1. All right, so I'll go over to the suave hairstyle, and I'll shut this down, and then I will grab a random hairstyle, and I'll plug in the displacement, and I'll say this is style number 2. And I'll grab buzz cut, and I'll hide it up, and I'll plug in a random hairstyle, and say this is style number 3. I'll grab the flat top, and I will random hairstyle, plug it in, and I'll say this is style number 4. And then slight bangs, I will plug in a random hairstyle yet again, and I'll say this is number 5. All right, now look at that. 4 out of 5 of these are disappeared right now. And why is that? Well, it's probably because the random value that this thing gave for this unique identifier was somewhere around 3, point 0.4 to 0.6. And what's important here is if you look from this view, you'll still see them all here, because this is something you only get out of a rendered view, all right? So if I duplicate this around, new skin tone, same haircut, but as I keep duplicating these, look, I'm going to get a random haircut every time I duplicate it. Now, I can still go and edit this. So let's say the slight bangs. So let's just put this displacement over here, and we can say the slight bangs, let's just give them a hair color about there, maybe darken it up. Sure, something like that. That's cool, but maybe, you know, you also want the hair color to change, right? It's as simple as, okay, well, let's do what we just did again on an easier level. Go into our groups here, and we'll add in a random, and we'll change the seed to 3, because our skin tone is 1. Our hair style is 2. Now the hair color will be 3. Just remember which one you're going to use for each different thing. Search. Let's just do a color ramp. And I can, let's just add some hair colors in here. So, 0, we can have black there. And then I like to, you know, the smaller, the less room they have, the less likely they'll come up. So you can always just go through and, yeah, at the very end here, you can actually like add in some unnatural, like dyed hair colors, like something like what's a hair color you probably wouldn't see often walking down the street, but you might, you know, you just might. So like a purpley hair, maybe. Right? Just like there's a small chance that someone's going to have this hair color. All right, perfect. If I hit F2, I can rename this hair colors. Perfect. And since this is the seed for this, I can just plug this value right in there. And I will grab both of these here, and I will plug, first of all, plug it into the hair, the base hair color. Now that's going to work for just the slight bangs, because we have to affect all of them, remember? So we'll grab these here, and we'll Control G that. And I don't know that we need anything, but we can't, no reason we can't change it later if we do. Back in here, I will call this one Random Hair Color. Perfect, and that actually contains the seed already. So I can just go through each of these. Flat top, we'll open this guy up, and we'll enter groups. We'll drop in a random hair color, and just plug that right in here. Because remember, we want to use the random color, right? Because it has its own seed. Balding. Open this up. Random hair color into the base color.
Suave. Random hair color.
Look at this guy. We got a purple. This guy's got a purple haircut over here. You know, but it's not likely. It's not likely. Is this buzz cut? Mr. Buzz Cut over here does not have one yet. All right, random hair color, shloop. There we go. I think that's all of them. And look at that. Every time you can regenerate a new group of people. Let me save this. Remember to save. So if I was gonna redo this here, I might make this buzz cut a little closer to the head, just because, you know, whatever. But you know, this is a random character generator right here, and it's using different randoms every time. Every new character I duplicate is gonna be, you know, it's gonna be new. That works for me for a crowd. The cool thing is you can still animate these characters. You can still give them shape keys. You can still rig them even if you wanted to. That gets pretty intensive too. But on the renderer, whenever you have a bunch of characters doing a bunch of stuff, but like that doesn't look like there's one character that's exactly the same in it. I mean, maybe in the front row, but just to show you here, I can just open up this random hair color, and I can just change this seed ever so slightly. If you hold shift, you know, it changes the seed of these, so it's like, yeah, let's get a different distribution of these. But I actually liked where 3 was. That was pretty cool. But yeah, so you know, that's the tough part there with so congrats to you for going through the tough part of actually making the the mesh sort of come in and out using the displacement. But if you couldn't figure it out just yet, or it was a little too advanced for you, totally cool. Feel free just to download it. I've provided a link in the description to download the shader I've built, so you don't have to think through it. You can just use it and use it as an art tool. So I really hope this helped you out. I appreciate you watching, and let me know if you want to go further with this random character generator stuff in the future. There's so much we could cover with random character generation that I don't even, this is the first place I began. I don't want to say I don't know where to begin because I already began, but you feel me, So maybe we'll go do a little more of these. So thanks for watching. If this helps you out, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought, and feel free to follow me on Instagram at LGARD53, LGARD53. I'm posting animations over there and also my client work. So, feel free to reach out, DM me, and all the good stuff. So, take care.